Thank you for joining Grassroots Republican of Washington State's interview with Al Rosenthal. Thank you, Al, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So what position are you running for?
I'm running for 41st District, Position 2. It's a state position. Mercer Island, Bellevue, a little bit of Issaquah, a little bit of Sammamish, Newcastle. That's the general area.
Okay, for those that don't know you, can you tell us a bit about you, your background, and what factored into your decision to run?
I've got a degree in civil engineering, worked all my working career for various aircraft companies as a structural analyst for aircraft. I moved to the Seattle area in 1991. I own commercial properties in King County, retired from Boeing in 2014, but I'm very busy with hands-on, taking care of commercial properties. I've also dealt at the commercial properties with the homeless problem personally.
You're a candidate that is running on law and order, is that correct?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, what the current legislature has done to the law is the big contributor to the problems we're having now. In 2021, one of the worst laws they passed was House Bill 1054. It does a lot of things. One of the worst things it does is restricts the police from pursuing a long list of crimes. Like, one of the things you can do is, if you steal a car, if the police see you, you hit the gas, and there's no reason, by no means can they ever chase you for stealing a car. And one thing that's happened with car theft, the number one cause for car theft used to be joyrides. Now, with car thefts more than doubling, the number one reason for stealing cars is to go commit another crime. One of the really absurd things is you are allowed to chase someone, the police are allowed, if they commit a violent crime. So if they were to commit a violent crime, like, say, a police officer would witness a murder and the murderer jumps in a car and hits the gas, he can chase him. But before he can chase him, he has to call in for supervision permission, which gives the person who committed the violent crime a head start on the cop catching him. There's other laws too, where the state Supreme Court declared our felony drug laws unconstitutional because it only said if you possess the hard drugs. And somebody went up to the state Supreme Court and they said, well, I bought those jeans used and I didn't know there was meth in the pocket. And the Supreme Court decided, yeah, possession, that's unconstitutional. All they had to do for that felony law was add the word possession and knowledge, and it would have been constitutional. Instead, they changed it to hard drugs to a misdemeanor, possession of hard drugs to a misdemeanor, and you have to be caught and convicted 3 times before there are any consequences at all of the misdemeanor.
So you do feel that crime has significantly increased over the last 2 years?
Oh, it's definitely increased. And actually, my own personal experience in the last 2 years, in the last year, I've had to paint over massive graffiti at a property in West Seattle 3 times. That same property, they did another thing of graffiti on glass on one of these spaces that had just gone vacant. And I went to scrape off the paint off the glass with a razor blade like you normally would do. And there were still markings in the glass. And when they replaced that glass, I said, what'd they do? Well, they used paint with acid in it so that it etches into the glass so that you can't ever scrape it off. That same space, somebody, when it was in between tenants, but it looked like it was occupied, broke in from the roof, went through the drop ceiling, did a bunch of damage. And then when they realized they couldn't unlock the door from the inside, you needed a key, smashed the glass on the door, but it's windshield glass, so they actually still couldn't get out. And when they got out, they ended up climbing back out through the roof the way they got in. And one of my other tenants has been broken into and their register emptied. So that's all in the last 2 years. And prior to that, on any of my commercial properties, I've had pretty much no problems. And it's all come up in the last 2 years.
Does your opponent agree with your position that crime has increased and is a problem?
I doubt it. I think she's more sympathetic to criminals than she is to victims or the police. I don't think my guess is she's probably never spoken to a rank and file police officer and ask them, what are we doing wrong? What are the problems? See, where I've spoken to the rank and file police many, many times over the years, usually it's overcalling about homeless on commercial property. And when the police show up, and in Seattle, that could take a long time. But when they show up, first thing I do is say something to them to let them know I support them. Like in Seattle, if a Seattle police officer shows up, I would say, you guys are great. It's City Hall that's the problem. And once you do that, the police will start telling you about what they think is wrong. I even had one Seattle police officer, without me prompting him, it was a year ago Halloween in West Seattle. I'd called him for, I think it was the graffiti. And he said, even if you've had COVID, they're going to make us get the vaccine, which showed me, I didn't ask him if he had COVID, but he showed me one of the things he disliked most was that, I'm assuming maybe he had COVID, that they were still going to try to force him to get the vaccine or leave. And, however somebody feels about the COVID vaccine, it's absurd when they think, well, we're going to make a vaccine that's better than if you already got the disease. When you get a vaccine, it's fooling your body to make it think that you've gotten the disease and produces antibodies. You can never fool your body better than actually getting the disease. And since then, the data has shown that if you've had COVID, it works better than any vaccine at preventing you from getting COVID again. That being said, I'm not anti-vaccine. There are people that absolutely should get the vaccine. People have health problems. People that are very old. Kids under the age of 18 that are healthy, there's really no statistics that show they should have to be forced to get the vaccine. I mean, their parents want them to get the vaccine, they should be free to get it. But so this notion where the government would argue you have to get the vaccine even though you've had COVID goes against all science, and it just boggles my mind why they would do that.
So, in your opinion, are there some laws that need to be changed to make Washington, Seattle area safer?
The state laws, and I'm running for a state office. The first law I would change would be House Bill 1054. That's the law that I was mentioning earlier, where the police are not allowed to pursue criminals for many, many things, and car theft is one of them. Also, if a criminal were to break into your house and the police were called, and if the person who broke in was getting into his car as the police arrived and hit the gas, the police are not allowed to chase him for that. There are only certain violent crimes and sex crimes that they're allowed to. And like I said earlier, then they have to get permission from their supervisor to chase. The other thing is the drug laws. Like I said, we need to make use of hard drugs a felony. And the reason for that is if you're a dealer, we want to put you away for a long time. If you're a user and an addict, we want to be able to then put you into a facility, and I'll call it a facility, not a jail, but a facility where you can't leave, and you have to get treatment, and you have to get intense treatment for a couple of weeks, then you have to stay a good bit longer to be kept drug-free, and then try and find family that would take you in and not leave you out on the streets. Because if you're a drug addict, even family doesn't want you in their house.
Okay. Now, if I was somebody, and I want to be clear that I am not this somebody, who wanted to increase crime, why would I vote for your opponent over you? So if I wanted to increase crime, why would I vote for your opponent and not you?
Well, obviously, all of the bad laws that I've just talked about, she voted for. And she doesn't understand the mind of a criminal. If a criminal feels there'll be no prosecution for committing a lot of crimes, they will go and commit the crimes. I don't understand how she thinks that not prosecuting crimes, not allowing the police to do their job is going to reduce crime. I mean, she's either completely unknowing or sympathetic to the criminals, and you'd have to ask her which one she is.
Okay, again, on that same vein, if I was someone, and I am not, but if I am someone who wanted to increase the number of people living on the streets and taking drugs, why would I vote for your opponent and not you?
Well, she's not trying to get fentanyl off the streets. She's not looking to enforce drug laws. Um, Even if a person is just a user, like I said before, you need to stop them from using the drugs. And the way to stop them is when they commit a crime. And if you were to make hard drugs illegal again, that would now be a crime. And you need to get them off the drugs. She thinks it's compassionate, like many other people like her, to let them live on the streets, let them do drugs, let them shoplift to pay for their drugs, and eventually they'll overdose and die. Or, unlike COVID, which gets overcounted, somebody has a heart attack, he dies, he had COVID, oh, that's a COVID death. Well, overdoses in the United States in 2021 were 107,000, and 76,000 of those were fentanyl. Now, what is crazy about fentanyl, in 2015, there were only 5,000 deaths. But what also doesn't get reported is that comes out to, the best I can remember, it comes out to about 275 people a day dying of overdoses. What that doesn't count, though, is a lot of people are on drugs and they walk out in front of a car and get killed. That's not an OD. The two people that are on drugs, one stabs another one, that's not an OD. Somebody lives out on the streets on drugs for 10 years and dies of heart problem, liver problem at age 40. That was due to the drugs. That's not counted as a drug death. So the drug overdose of 107,000 is probably way more than double that, what the real death number is. And even counting just 107, COVID deaths back in May of this year were lower than the OD deaths, which is only the 107 number, which is probably double that really for real deaths from the drugs. And currently, COVID deaths are just slightly higher than what the OD deaths are per day. But yet, that should be in the news every single day. And it never is. And I'd only be guessing, but if it were in the news, they'd have to ask, where are the drugs coming from? Then they'd have to ask, how are the drugs getting here? And if they ask those questions, it wouldn't fit their narrative.
So if I was a Democrat or an independent or a Republican who wants safe streets, why should I vote for you? Why
Well,
would a Democrat who wants safe streets vote for you instead of your opponent?
the reason you'd want to vote for me, if you were a Democrat or an independent, unless you're an extreme Democrat, in that case, you never want to vote for me. I'm a socially moderate Republican, but I'm physically conservative. I'm also conservative when it comes to the rule of law, a rule of law that treats everybody equally. And, I'm endorsed by people that you might not typically think would be endorsed by a Republican. I'm endorsed by the Log Cabin Republicans who represent LGBT people. I'm endorsed by David Leong, who is the president of the Seattle Chinese American Chamber of Commerce. I'm not endorsed by the chamber. I'm endorsed by David personally, who is the president. I'm endorsed by Safe East Side, which is a primarily Asian group that is against the idea of all of the hotels that are being bought by King County for low barrier housing. And what they don't tell you about low barrier housing is low barrier housing means you're free to abuse drugs and alcohol on the premises. And that you're giving housing to people that have drug and alcohol problems. That doesn't solve the problem. You need to stop them from doing the drugs and the alcohol. And most people would agree with that.
Okay, Al, thank you for taking the time to be interviewed by me for the Grassroots Republicans of Washington State. If people want more information about you and your views, do you have a website that they can look at?
Sure. My website is northwestal.us. And I named it that. Doesn't seem like your typical political website, but it is. And I named it that because I really enjoy the outdoors in Washington here, from spearfishing in Near Bay, Westport, to skiing up in the mountains and hiking. And that's what I really love about the state of Washington, the good outdoor areas that we have.
Do you have any final comments?
No, I think I've covered everything.
Okay, so I'm going to link your website down below in the comments section. And Al, again, thank you very much for taking this time to talk with me.
Hey, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye.